that Mayor Givens is an excused absence. Other members are present. Approval of agenda.
No changes, Mayor Pro Tem.
No changes. Need a motion.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by, you guys, was it you guys?
Yes.
Councilmember Olvera, seconded by Councilmember Alvarado. Roll call?
Councilmember Alvarado,
Yes.
Olvera.
Yes.
Espinoza,
Yes.
and Pratt.
Good, thank you. Public comment, anyone in the audience care to address the group? I don't see any public other than staff. Having none, we'll move on. Management reports, the first item is the fiscal year 2024 to 2025 revenue projections and expenses overview, workshop number 1.
So, Mayor and Council, it's that time of year again, Mayor and Council, to start our budget process. As become our practice, this is the first workshop that we will have with you, which we will cover from a high level, our revenue projections, and then citywide expenditures, as well as inter-service funds and enterprise funds. That will be followed up with our CIP, our capital improvement program. It's a 5-year program that our public works director and deputy public works director will provide an update on that as well. So this is interactive. So as we're making the presentations, if we have questions, we ask that you go ahead and ask those. So this first presentation will be made by our finance director, Roger. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Council members, Roger Sanchez, your finance director. So I'd like to give a brief overview of the financial performance for the fiscal year 22-23. And this is the base. This helps us to see what's coming for the upcoming budget. I will also give you an overview of the projected revenues. As it was already mentioned, the Public Works team will provide an overview of the CAP projects later on. So on the financial information, the first thing I'd like to show you is the citywide statement of net positions, and this is a historical perspective. As of the end of fiscal year 22-23, the city had the total assets were $235.56 million. This is the book value of the assets. Now, this is a combined, it's meant to give you an overview. It's not meant to give you an analysis because this is really mixing apples and oranges at once. This is the citywide. We're mixing the general fund, the water fund, wastewater, everything in one, so as to give you a perspective. And what it shows you is that the green shows you the net position for the city. And the light yellow gives you the liabilities. And I apologize, there's a misspelling on the liabilities word. But there's really no debt, and the liabilities really pertain to short-term liabilities and also related to some pensions and OPEB obligations. But other than that, everything is pretty clean and healthy. Now, once we dive into the general fund, that is a lot more meaningful. The chart that you see is the general fund, is the fund balance. And you can see a historical perspective there. As you can see, there was an increase on the general fund balance of $8.14 million or 13.74% increase. Now, what that means is that throughout in the past, revenues have exceeded the expenditures, and so it keeps building into the reserves. And what that is, at the end of the year, we saw a balance in the general fund of $67.4 million. So again, that had a significant increase compared to the previous year.
That would be July of 23.
Yes.
Mhm.
So now I'd like to show you the general fund revenues versus expenditures. In the first section, you see the historical expenses on the labor cost. Next to it is the operations and maintenance. Again, this is a historical overview. After that, we see the sales tax agreements. And then we see the capital expenditures. Now you see the revenues, and the red line represents the total expenditures for each year. In the fiscal year 17-18, we know, if you notice, the expenses exceeded the revenues. And the reason is because the city council decided to do a prepayment for the pension cost. And that was a nice, to get ahead of the future obligations. And that is the reason why you see that the reserves have had to be tapped in. But other than that, you can see that the revenues year over year have exceeded the expenditures. In fact, the most recent year, the gap had gotten wider, which is the reason why we had the fund balance increase in excess of $8 million. So that is the space between the revenues and expenses is what is accumulates back into the fund balance. Now the next slide is the water fund unrestricted net position. And with this chart, it gives you a lot of information, even though it's a simple chart. As you can see, from the year 22 to the year 23, there was a decrease of $1.1 million or 30.89%. And what that means is really that we had an operating loss in the water fund. The expenses were higher than the revenues, and so we expect this year to happen on the same. It's not going to take long before we run out of money on the water fund. Now, thankfully, we're working on a rate study right now to address some of those challenges there. There are many reasons why the expenses, and obviously the general fund is incredibly healthy compared to other cities in the valley. But as you can see on the water fund, on those challenges, why is it that we have expenses higher than the revenues? Well, part of it is the rate study was completed, I want to say like 7 years ago. Is that right, Mike? And so it's been a while since we've had a rate study. We also had significant inflation challenges recently. So electricity costs have gone double digits year over year. We've also had some labor cost, fuel cost increases, all of those increases. But we also had filtration systems that they have to be maintained as well. They have been very expensive on those. We used to have the correctional facilities, and what does that have to do with this? Well, there's a direct relationship because the CCF correctional facility used to absorb the majority of the indirect cost from the administration. But now that CCF is gone, therefore we're allocating cost back to some of the enterprise funds, and that has compounded the problem into those funds. So that's the reason why we had this operating loss.
I have a question. Were the meters that were installed, was that included in here too, or was that like paid out of a different fund?
Well, that is this fund, and that is a great question. The way we see the meters or assets being impacted on the operating fund is through depreciation. And this is a technical term in the sense that we capitalize equipment and fleet and other capital items, and they show up not as a loss, but they show up on the balance sheet, but they come back to us in the form of depreciation. So depreciation keeps growing, and it is affecting the profit and loss. So yes, it is affecting. It had an effect on this as well.
Okay, thank you.
We're good. Okay.
Doesn't everybody already pay something once they get the meter? Is that already added on? That should make it up?
Once they add the meter,
Mm-hmm. The increase that we added to the,
so say that again.
There's a
isn't that right?
fee already
Yeah,
on.
there is a fee on there. Doesn't that pick that up?
Well, we have the meter replacements, right, Mike?
Well, just like other equipment and assets, we have, there are replacement costs that are
Right.
factored into our overall operating budget. But if you're talking about the meter service fee, there is a cost associated with consumption and there's a fixed cost on your bill. But what we're seeing, we are investing in the meter installations, and that's attributing to the funding shortages that we're seeing here. It's an investment to, ultimately meet a state mandate and hopefully enhance conservation in the years ahead.
Okay, so it isn't the depreciation, it's the cost of the meter itself to even get them installed. No?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
yes. Uh-huh.
however, when we purchase equipment, we don't show it on the profit and loss directly right away. Instead, we capitalize it and then we slowly allocate it over multiple years on the profit and loss statement. So it takes multiple years. We take chunks when we buy capital assets at a time. So I know it's pretty confusing, but definitely has an impact on all of our purchases, including capital purchases. We also had an operating loss on the wastewater fund. It wasn't as significant as the water fund, but nevertheless, we had a decrease on the net position, unrestricted net position of $270,000 or 8.5%. Again, a lot of it has to do with the increases in cost. And we're expecting another loss once we close the 23-24 as well. Again, unless we address those trends, then the reserves are going to be consumed. It's not going to take long for the resource to be consumed. Then I'd like to show you a citywide view of the labor cost and the maintenance and operations. And this is a good view as to show you the trend as we add more capacity, as we add more services or whatever the changes. But a lot of it has come from inflation components. Again, as I mentioned, electricity cost, fuel cost, and you can see the breakdown between the labor cost and the maintenance and operations. The maintenance and operation has the highest change. Now, this is a change, an increase of $3.6 million or 13.5% compared to the previous year. We don't get to see the details on costs related to information technology, so I thought I would share this with you. We do have historical view of IT cost. As you can see, the labor cost and then the maintenance and operations. Some of the changes on the maintenance and operations are related to consulting services, but also there's a big trend, a big change going in the IT industry where now everything is being paid by subscription and the costs are increases. The costs are so significant that even the rules have changed in accounting where we now have new rules to account for those changes. And now we see more than ever before subscription, everything from the Office suite with where we use our tools to the ERP system, financial system is based on a subscription. So that's one of the reasons why we see those cost increases. Now, on the opposite side, we see the shop have decreased in the past couple of years. Now, I'm not, Fish is not here. I'm not a super expert on this, but I would assume part of it is the fleet have been replaced. So we have newer vehicles. Probably there's less maintenance for those fleet. But the bottom line is that there has been cost decreases on that area, which is good news. Now, the facilities maintenance is another internal service fund. And if you recall, there's been a couple of changes in personnel. So we had those changes, but also we added into the facilities maintenance, the CCF building, which has incurred additional costs, including to this point, electricity costs and other projects. So one change going forward is that we're centralizing even more cost into this facilities maintenance. What we're doing is really moving from the department some of the cost related to maintaining the buildings into this fund. So we expect a higher increases, but in proportion, the department fund, the departments will have decreases as well. Then I'd like to give you a 5-year compound annual growth rate for labor cost at 5.4% and for the maintenance and operations at 14.7% for a combined 9.1%. Here's the electric cost. As you can see, we've seen significant increases year over year. And I mean, they're close to $2 million for the city as a whole, and this has the highest impact on the water fund.
So has solar helped us at all? Otherwise it would be higher?
The solar is comparable with PG&E costs right now. We're kind of paying off the investment. So and we have had a consultant confirm that the solar panels are producing very well. We just haven't reached that point where the
I see.
buyback period is. We're benefiting from that.
Did they tell us in advance how much time it would take?
Well,
5 years?
our particular agreement gives us a 7-year buyout window, so we'll just have to look at that a little closer. I think it could stretch out. Just depends on, we have the right to, we have the opportunity to buy out the system within 7 years. And I think it just depends on when we want to exercise that right.
The electric cost, that's the light bills, the charging vehicles,
So this is all PG&E cost. So that includes all the power for buildings and the biggest component is the water fund because we have the water pumps, the wells and the
Yeah.
pumps, which require a lot of energy
yeah.
for the underground water. But that's what that is. I can't remember the exact figure, but probably like 80% is attributed to the water fund.
Mhm.
Well, when we look at the warrants though, from time to time, they don't show that they've gone up. As a matter of fact, I would think it shows like a decrease, but it's because of the payments then, huh? Do I understand that right?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, when we pay on the warrants for PG&E costs, is it because of the payments?
Well,
It seemed like we were paying out less to PG&E.
Well, these are the, excuse me, these are the warrants, actual dollars.
Okay.
And even though you might see once in a while that they decrease, perhaps seasonal, whether it be through winter or whatever the reason might be. But once at the end of the year, these are the actual cost that, for each year. So they're in fact have been increasing.
So they could have been even higher
And
without solar.
yeah, and going back to your comment, it's and I apologize, it's not only PG&E, but we're also paying the solar component, which you're probably seeing decreases on the PG&E, but we're also paying
That's what I was asking.
the other side. So combined, we see the power cost as a combined going up. I would imagine that if it wasn't for the solar, we would probably see a higher cost. But, we haven't done analysis, but that would be my assumption.
Just a quick note, though, that as you're all aware, consumers and customers of PG&E, they continue to increase the rates.
Mhm.
And even more so now, there's a new rate increase being proposed for the next couple years as it is. As a city, we're not exempt from that. We pay for that
That
increase
was
as
my
well.
question, because
And
they're going to charge an extra fee monthly.
exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's a combination of of factors, but one of those being the fact that the rates for PG&E have also gone up significantly in the last 5 years. We may be able to track that at some point, but I can tell, and we see that in our own household bills, that it's gone up from one year to another.
Mhm.
Can I ask a question? The solar, are we on like a true up, kind of like what what I have at my house where they monitor it and they see whether you're within the means, or are we trying to just get as much solar as we can and produce as much as we can, or are we trying to like take care of certain areas? Cause I know we did some at the city yard, right? So is that meant to take care of the city yard, or are we just trying to produce enough to offset the costs of other bills?
Well, the solar panels at the Corp Yard generate electricity for the water well and tank on the same premises. And it doesn't quite cover the needs for that facility, but it offsets the cost. And so the solar panels you see at other sites are exclusive to that site.
Okay.
And the value that they bring to the site just depends on the type of well or piece of equipment that they're operating.
Okay, okay, that's what I was asking. Thank you.
Mhm.
So although we've seen costs going up, I'm shifting back to the general fund because this is what we're projecting for the next year budget. So in the general fund, we expect increases on the revenue side. As you can see, there's the taxes and the other revenues where we're projecting $41.7 million. Again, that's an increase. This is attributed to increases in sales taxes and also property taxes. So all of that, if you recall the first slide on the general fund where the revenues exceed the expenses, there's still room. Although we do expect additional costs, just recently the city council approved 4 additional officers. So we're gonna have additional labor cost and even a dispatcher and different cost increases. But other than that, we assume a status quo, the same service level as before, with the exception of the previous approvals that you had recently. And we do expect that the revenues will cover the expenses going forward, and we do expect a surplus as well.
I have a question, Roger. What is the fines part of that? What's being covered by that?
On the fines,
Yes.
so the city's revenue has, the taxes, we have charges for services, we have licenses and permits. Once in a while, we also have fines from the police, but they're very minimal on the fines, but some of them are combined with other revenues. But it's hard to tell. It's so small of an amount on the fines, but it is related to fines from the city, and it could be related to police or permits or some other fines.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Now, this is it'd be nice if you focus on the 6-year compound annual growth rate, because that gives you a picture of what has been the growth on taxes, on charges for services, licenses and fees, and other general fund revenues. For a combined general fund revenues, we had a 6-year growth rate of 9.7%. Now, that is very good news for the city to see that trend over multiple years. This comes directly from the sales tax consultant. And as you can see, this is what they see on the horizon for sales taxes. Now, I would expect the fulfillment center to bump it a lot higher than this. However, we had some challenges on other contributors in the sales taxes. The good news we're still on a positive trend. But there's a few large contributors that are slowing down during this time. So thank goodness for the most recent fulfillment center. So this is all I have. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
I just real quick, and back to the solar. 7 years, then we're gonna determine if we're gonna purchase or continue leasing?
Correct.
And we're at 6 years now, right? So from 18 to now, or?
I think we're about 3 or 4 years in. I think they were constructed 2020, 2021.
Oh, okay. That's all my question. Thanks.
On the shop fleet expenses. This one,
Mhm.
I see the drop, 21, 22, and 22, 23. Did we, see any savings by getting rid of our garbage truck fleet? Or what would be the reason for,
So I can answer.
drop in expenses?
I can answer part of it. If you notice on the labor cost, there's a decrease in the labor cost. Part of it is we've shifted some of the labor into the public transit because public transit, we receive grant money. And so that would save on this end. Now, because of this transit money, we have the right, but also the mechanic puts his time into the public transit, significant time. And that's why we've been able to shift some of his labor cost. Now, I would assume, but maybe Mike can help me with that on maintenance, maybe there is some relationship with the refuse trucks that we no longer have, but I'm not really sure if that's true or not.
Not with what's in front of me, but we could definitely follow up on that.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Any other questions, council?
Mayor Pro Tem and Council, if I may just let you know that we are doing a rate study right now for the enterprise funds for water and sewer. And as you saw in the funds that was just presented, we are running low on reserves. Our costs have gone up significantly, both from the operational side, the per cost for electricity, the materials, the frequency in which we have to change out the filtration medium, and what those costs associated with it have increased. And also just overall operational expenses in those two funds, water and sewer. So probably in the very near future, we're going to be coming back to you with the results of that rate study that will result in having to take into consideration increasing the rates for both sewer and water. But that is coming because it is necessary, particularly on the sewer. There is a planned expansion through the joint partnership that we have with North of the River, in which they're looking to increase capacity. And so if we want to continue to exercise our option of the current capacity level that we have, it is going to result in a significant contribution of our fair share for that expansion of the wastewater treatment plant. So just want to give you a heads up that in the very in the very near future, we're going to be coming back to you with what the results of that rate study are.
Just another question. We mentioned the new police officers coming on board and they're gonna add to the
Yeah.
city's expenses. And then, is that factoring in the cars and all that we're gonna need to, or is that gonna come later?
So,
Councilmember Speranza, Mayor and Council. So what was shown today is the salaries and the wages. So part of the budget, we will have a request of the 2 cars that we cycle through every year as part of the replacement program. And then we will have a request for additional cars for the new officers that you've authorized for prepping our deployment for Gossamer Grove. But that'll be part of the budget itself coming back to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ready for the next item?
Mm-hmm.
Next item has to do with the community or the capital improvement projects.
Yes, sir.
Honorable
We're just gonna hand it off to Mike and Alex, Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor and Council.
Honorable Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, I want to, Michael James, Director of Public Works, I'm joined by Alex Gonzalez, the Deputy Director, to kind of cover the update to the 5-year capital improvement program. This slideshow wasn't included in your agenda packet, so if you'd like a copy of it after the meeting, please feel free to let me know. But you do have the actual capital improvement program book to refer to. But with that, like last year, the 5-year capital improvement program document contains details on the projects planned for completion and funding. We're talking about project objectives and funding sources. What's unique about this year's document is that it's been created and formatted using ClearGov, which is the same software-based program that was used to create the strategic plan. So having the same software generally provides a good link between the strategic plan objectives and the projects needed to complete those objectives. So now I will say that with this, the ClearGov is pretty new to us. We've been working with this we're working with it for the last 3 weeks. And there's lots of customizations and features that we're still exploring. And by all means, if not tonight, in the future, if there's content or details you'd like to see in the document, please let us know. So moving on, we're going to start things off with the 5-year capital improvement plan summary. And this is broken down by fiscal year and fund. Now, the first bar on your left is the current fiscal year that we're in. And then the next 5 years are really what we're focused on from a planning perspective. You know, as you can see, the CIP doesn't have a problem reaching the $10 to $15 million range, but you'll notice in fiscal year 24-25, we're seeing a tremendous spike, and that's mostly because we're focused on completing one-time high-profile projects, and particularly in parks and public facilities, and notably the police substation, the aquatic center restoration, and the North Shafter Community Park. Now, starting at fiscal year 25-26 and beyond, there's going to be a stronger emphasis on wastewater projects, and you heard the city manager mention the wastewater plant expansion. That's going to take up a large portion of our CIP in the years ahead. So we're going to start looking at 5-year project summaries that have been categorized. The first category is parks and public facilities, currently valued over a 5-year period at $32 million. Now, over 60% of that is funded by state grants, and there's also a considerable participation by the general fund. Next slide is just a detailed summary of all the projects. And I want to point out that this is a 5-year forecast of projects. This is not what's going to happen next fiscal year. So again, we have $32 million in projects in the parks and public facilities. Approximately $23 million is funded by grants, and the balance $9 million is locally derived, probably more than likely local matching funds for those projects. Moving on to the streets category, $20 million value over a 5-year period. Now, the streets program is generally, the funding's a little more balanced. You have, and there's minimal use of the general fund. You tend to have reoccurring sources of revenue every year to fund projects and programs. State-derived funds such as the Transportation Development Act, gas tax, and there's federal programs. And there's also one-time grants, generally from federal sources. Now, the streets project summary table is, and we list specific roadway projects, specific roadway segments. But there's also projects that have yet to be identified, notably residential projects. Those projects will ultimately be identified, ranked and scheduled within the 5-year CIP. In addition to one-time construction projects, the streets CIP is made up of funding that covers routine maintenance such as pavement sealing and striping, sidewalks, curb gutters replacements, and then pedestrian, bicycle, and ADA improvements. Now, the objective with the water CIP, which is valued at 20 million, is to leverage grants for new infrastructure. Some of these grants have been awarded, some are likely to be awarded, and some are prospective at this point. And in addition to capital projects, that we're going to be continuing maintenance and repairs of existing infrastructure. So the water project list is highlighted by a new well and tank at the North Shafter, just south of the planned park site, as well as the wonderful industrial park. And in addition to projects like new infrastructure, you know, we talked about meters previously. We anticipate having all of the new meters installed this year, but we have to have reoccurring funds to invest in meter replacements as meters reach their useful life, because once they reach a certain point, they tend to underreport consumption. So it's important that we stay vigilant with funding the water CIP, particularly meter replacements, just to make sure we're getting an accurate reads on those meters.
How do you learn that? How do you learn that they're going down?
That's what meter vendors tend to tell you.
Mhm.
It tends to be true that they over a 10 to 15 life cycle, they'll tend to underreport the water that goes through them.
Well, that's a long span, 10 to 15. So we're just watching the monthly use of it and then find it on our own. I mean, there's
What
no
might-
signal of any kind.
What might trigger, you know, a investigation or prioritizing a certain segment for meter replacements is, you know, there might be more leaks, there might be more abnormalities. And so that's why we try to make a habit of staying on top of the trends that we're seeing with the individual meters that are read.
Mike, how old are our oldest meters?
Some of the older meters that we've already replaced, 15, 20 years old.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a quick question. Can you go back one slide, please?
Correct.
On the graph where it says the 19.52 million, it says water grant for 10.75. Is that one grant for
No, that's a combination.
a combination of them?
Correct.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
And I think we go to the next slide. If you look at the grant columns to the left there, it'll kind of detail what those sources of grant funding
Got it.
are. And then finally, as far as the wastewater category goes, I mean, $53 million, and this is nearly half of the 5-year CIP. And that's because there are significant upgrades and expansions being planned for the wastewater plant that's jointly owned by the city and North River Sanitary District. So the wastewater, the plant expansion project is the last row in this table. And so it's $46 million just for the plant expansion. And it's important to point out that there's cost shared amongst the existing customers and the new development, because they both have a stake in this project, because the project entails upgrades and efficiency upgrades, and as well as expanding to accept more flow and treat more flow. And so in addition to projects, we're going to be vigilant with, you know, a routine, we can go back to for routine wastewater projects such as lift station improvements and manhole coating. So we want to make sure that's included in our CIP forecast. So at the time that we had, we did a pretty quick, high-level summary of five-year forecast, and you might be wondering like, well, what's on the horizon and what's gonna happen in the short term here with this project, with the projects that we're planning? So we wanted to provide this final slide to kind of give you some highlights of what to expect in 24-25. With the Aquatic Center, the pool restoration project that's underway will be completed this summer, and then we'll be a transition into designing and constructing the new building. For the parks CIP, we plan to complete the community park in North Shafter, add soccer field lighting to the soccer fields at Veterans Park, and the balance of the Clean California projects that are underway, notably Stringham Park and the skate park, will be completed later this year as well. For public facilities, the plan is to have the seventh standard police substation completed. Upgrades to Veterans Hall, notably new replacement doors and security enhancements. There'll be fiber optic master planning to optimize and promote the use of city fiber. For the roadway projects, we're going to continue a reconstruction, a phased reconstruction of Zerker Road and Laredo Highway. And we're going to resurface both travel lanes of Santa Fe Way between Los Angeles Avenue and 7th Standard Road. And then thanks to AB 617 funding that's going to be allocated to the city, we plan to make significant improvements within the core city for bike and pedestrian improvements. And then finally, on the water CIP, we plan to activate well 21, which is a new groundwater well immediately across the street from the Ross West Warehouse and Distributions facility on Zachary Avenue. It's going to be the sole source of water, primary source of water for the wonderful industrial park. That will alleviate the amount of water that we have to pump and convey from the core city to the WIP. And then finally, I mentioned the new well in North Shafter. We plan to complete the drilling phase of that project this fiscal year as well. So that's just a sliver of the projects that we have planned. But with that, we're gonna just open up as much time as possible for questions if you may have them.
Anyone have questions?
We, the city has a 1/3 ownership in the wastewater plant. And the other 2/3 is owned by North River Sanitary District. We have an agreement with North River Sanitary District that has them operating the plant and leading all of the expansion projects. And once they're required, once the flows reach a certain point, then they have to start planning and building upgrades to the plant to allow for more flow. So the city, with that agreement I mentioned, has first right of refusal for additional 1/3. So every time they expand the plant, we could buy another 1/3 of that expansion. So what we're doing right now, in fact, is we're determining exactly how much capacity we need. If it's based on flow, then we may not necessarily need 1/3, because with water conservation and other types of efficiencies, the flows just aren't growing like we forecasted, say 10, 15 years ago. They're actually they're pretty steady. So perhaps we don't need to buy the full 1/3 capacity allotment that we could take advantage of. We could possibly save costs, preserve the wastewater fund, and buy only what we think we realistically need for the next expansion. So right now, the wastewater plant is permitted for 7.5 million gallons per day. And our 1/3 of that is 2.5 million gallons per day. But we're only using 1.5 of that. And it'll take a long time for us to even need the 2.5 that we already purchased. So what we're doing literally right now is we're determining what our flow needs are going to be 10, 20 years, or even beyond that, just to make sure that we're factoring that into our wastewater fees.
If we bought some, and let's say we bought more now for the future, cheaper now than, or does it, it won't matter, even let's say 10 years from now, we say, hey, we need some more of the 1/3, do we buy, is it gonna be higher at 10 years from now?
General rules, it's always gonna be more expensive. It's just, what do we is that worth it to us to make that investment now? I think is what we're analyzing.
Just also too, that any unused capacity by the city north of the river would take that up and then they can sell that, not sell it, but take on other customers around the area that's within their sphere of influence that they can then provide that capacity to them.
Same little square that two people could be paying for it?
Well, not paying for it, but whatever capacity we know, so our share of it, if we don't buy it, then that becomes available. Right? So north of the river then can tell another large user and say, hey, well, I got capacity because City of Shafter didn't exercise their right to buy up their 30%. So then they can bring on other customers for that.
But if we bought more today, the future, even say we bought some more today, we don't use it, it's not costing us anything other than the purchase of it today.
Right.
See, I think we should look at that, because what happens if all of a sudden you have more farmland available or more developers available, and then, you know, to go out and do it, it just seems like we should be on top of it to start with.
Like the same, like, I know in the past, we did get ahead of it,
Mhm.
wells, lowering the bowl down lower, just in case, we were doing that yearly, I think, dropping a couple wells lower, just in case the level of the rock would be okay. We won't be a bind where we won't have any more, because the bowl were too short.
Correct, and it's a kind of a balancing act, because if you want to be proactive and purchase as much capacity as possible, you're impacting development impact fees, which could impact, you know, your ability to grow communities. So we're trying to keep that, be mindful of that as well.
Just to add that we are looking at the financing component in terms of what north of the river is projecting in terms of this expansion. It is in the millions. And so we too are looking at is what would be our bonding capacity, because it's our share of it could be 30, 40 million.
So if we don't have capacity available, then we will say, no, you can't develop. And that's a concern.
So we are exploring all those options and looking at the financing as we're looking not only at the development impact fees, but our rate study. We're taking that in consideration, because if you issue bonds, anytime you issue bonds, your current rates have to demonstrate that you have revenue to pay that debt service on an ongoing basis. So it can't be one of those things that you issue debt and say, well, I think we're going to be able to pay for it. Your financials and your enterprise fund have to be able to show that you have the revenue capacity to pay that debt. So it's, as Mike said, it's a balancing act, because we got to look at what can be generated from development impact fees, but also what really is going to pay for this is going to be your rates, because you can't use development impact fees to pay for debt. It has to be within your rates that you collect from end users to pay back the debt service.
If we're continuing expanding, so that's kind of 43 or Santa Fe, that's still part of the river front line, right? To the waste treatment plant. So that takes up more capacity.
Correct. The waste, the plant capacity and also the pipelines to get the sewer to the plant. So, correct.
I don't know. I think you need to be more aware of the fact that we're known and we are projecting to keep growing, and we need to have the capacity available when we need it.
Correct.
You know, I don't know what you guys have to say about that, but I think to lower and to decrease what we're going to have available to us is a concern, because we've always felt that even north of the river could take over what we had, and then we'd be short, and we don't want that to happen either.
Well, the agreement I referred to dates back to 1990, 91.
Mhm.
And a lot's changed in
Yes.
that period of time. That was before we even annexed 7 Standard Road, and north of the river's service area has changed quite a bit, and they're actually growing faster than we are. And their flows are actually triggering the need to expedite this project that we're talking about at the wastewater plant. So there's a lot of dynamics that have changed and we did a lot to stay on top of.
So when we'll be bringing that to you here as part of the rate study. We're going to be bringing that as well. And like I
So the
said,
rate study will identify that?
we have to account for the expansion in the rate study
Because
because
the expansion and the new growth pays for itself. Shouldn't come on to us.
Well, the project is, upgrades the existing facilities for the benefit of existing customers. So that's why it impacts the rates. And there's the other part of the project that expands the facilities to accept more flow, which is really the responsibility of developers because they require the additional flow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Do we supply Gossamer Grove with our own water, or is that being supplied by someone else right now?
The provider is Oildale Mutual. They have a dual water system. In fact, they have an irrigation service and a domestic service. That's Oildale Mutual's service area.
And that's adequate for right now?
That is correct. I mean, that was factored into our master planning several years ago when it was annexed, that they were in the best position, they being Oildale Mutual, to in the short term, bring water from the east side of 99 to the west side of 99 to service them. But now they're currently drilling wells and developing sources within Gossamer Groves to have a more stable water supply. So the logistics made Oildale Mutual the more logical provider in that area, which is, and the city is focused on the WIP and the industrial parks in that immediate area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions of staff? Okay, we can close this meeting and have a 5-minute break here. So I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed. Okay, we are adjourned.